So today I have a relatively interesting tutorial for you. Earlier in the year I made these planet forests, and over the course of the year I have been doing a lot of these kind of scenes which are, it's taking nature and restricting it to order in a kind of contained environment, and they're a lot of fun. And by the time I did the artificial ecosystems, I'd messed around with them so much that I had the idea to revisit the forest planet and retread over it, take that idea, flush it out more, make it better. Because if you're a beginner and you're only learning, I feel like if I'm the one helping you learn, for me to develop an idea further then helps you learn more if that idea was already flawed. So what we have here is one of the first scenes I've been making recently, and you can see it's kind of got similarities, but we are using the asteroid or the rock from a previous tutorial. Now, of course, this rock is free on the store, so you can still follow along. And the reason for that was because I felt like it gave it a much more natural look as opposed to just a sphere. And when you kind of get these offsets, it just gives a cooler look in general. And of course, when you are seeing those bits under the grass, again, just gives it a very igneous and lifelike feel. So this is the original scene. I just wanted you to see that, and we're using very sharp lights to get that very artificial look. We can come up here and look at it like that. It overall looks quite cool. Now this camera, contrary to how it might look, or this one even, is not actually head on. It's to the right a little bit, and it's a little bit above. That's the head on camera, and you can see we're up here like that just to get the shadow and to give it just a little bit better perspective. So we'll go over all those tricks, and we will start creating this. It's your typical forester stuff. We got VDB in there. Probably won't go over that. It's just the VDB. And let's get into it. The project files will be on the store, and of course you can grab the rock over there too. One last thing before we jump into the tutorial. BenQ reached out to me and wanted to sponsor this video, and they sent me a dimmable desk lamp. It's the Screenbar Plus, and what this does is it helps relieve eye strain. If you're like me, then you care a lot about your melatonin production and getting proper sleep, so you're not moody all day. And I recently actually did just buy blue light glasses because my eyes have been twitching uncontrollably, and that doesn't sound too good. So my solution was to buy them, and it was a bit of a divine intervention that BenQ wanted to send me this, as the big effect of it is it helps relieve eye stress from the blue light on your monitors. So if that's something you care about, if you're working late nights like me, you're going from your computer to your bed, you need to make sure your eyes aren't getting strained. You need to look after that stuff. If you were interested, go and take a look in the description. The link will be there. It's got a bunch of different options. Of course, you can dim it so you can change the intensity of the light. You can go warm or go cold. I tend to go warm. I haven't really ever used it on the cold setting because, well, my aim is to avoid that kind of light, especially in the evenings. You want to have warm light around you so your melatonin's kicking in. It looks awesome too. It looks very minimalist. It adds to that vibe if you're going with that in your setup. And the dimmer looks awesome, and it feels good. It's heavy. It doesn't feel lightweight. The build quality is absolutely brilliant. And yeah, if you're interested, go in the description, check that out. And without further ado, we'll get on with the tutorial. So when you start off and you get in your scene, you drag your rock in, that will be there. You can use a sphere if you want, but we're going to try and get a really nice look here, and I think using a rock shape like the free one on the store or any of the ones out of the rock pack is the way to go. Now of course we're going to begin with just scaling up the rock, and it's not going to like it at first, but we'll get there. And once it's there, we can just delete the sphere. We're using that as reference. Now I do finally have the script on my store for Z Camera. So you can just drop Z Camera in there, and now we're bang on where we want to be. I'm not really going to put too much effort into where I put this. Don't really care. That'll do. And what we'll do right now is we'll work in 124 by 124, and I'm approaching render, probably want to do 248. So to begin with, we'll just call this rock, and we'll put in a background. So you put in a plane, and just so I can see what I'm doing here, I'm going to press F2. And then camera's perspective, and now we can move around while the viewer stays the same. And then what we're going to do is you're going to holding shift, just hit on the bend deformer, and holding alt, hit on the subdivision surface. And now we can put the plane to maybe just put a couple more zeros in the end, and holding shift, we will bend the, hit fit to parent, make the strength 90, holding shift, bend it 90 once, and 90 again, and then you can just bring it down in Y space, and if we do NA, we can see things normally, and then we can just position it the way we want it, and looking over here at the viewer, we can see that looks okay. And then we will put on a Octane camera tag on the camera. I'll maybe zoom in a bit. Now I am going to adjust the rock. I think that was cool. And you can see here the shape of the rock. Now if I was to put a sphere in, just, you know, the two of them next to each other, what's going to give you a better look in your render, the kind of imperfect shape of the rock, is just going to make it that little bit better when it comes to adding the trees and the grass and all of that. Now next, we will save the scene. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in a light. Now we're going to go back to F2. I'm going to put the light to 50 by 50. If I'm ever using a small light to get some sharp shadows, that's kind of the size I go for. We put the power to 10,000, pop in a fall off map, set to 90 degrees, go into Cinema 4D tags and get a target. I'm sorry if I did that a little quick. It's pretty simple steps though. And we can just drag the light all the way out here. We're going to go on the right side. I'm going to go back a little bit. Now you see this nasty blowout. Here's a trick. Camera imager, highlight compression. Now it's gone. It's gone. I don't have to worry about that. It will come back, but we'll make the tweaks to make sure it doesn't stay. Okay. Now, what we're going to do next, we are going to put a material on the rock because the rock's white and we don't want a white rock. So what we'll do is we'll make a glossy material and pop it on the rock. Now I do have this material on the store, it's in the rock pack. It's kind of an asteroid material we're going to go for. But there is a free texture off of somewhere, I don't quite know, but I'll grab it quickly. So it's this rock here, and what we'll do is we'll just pop it in the diffuse. We'll put in a projection and a transform. We'll set the projection to box, and we're going to put in a color correction, and we're going to bring down the saturation, bring up our gamma a little bit, bring up our contrast. Maybe just try and lean into the hue a little bit. Not that it matters, it's desaturated. In fact, just whack it all the way down, I don't need it. Make sure the contrast is still up there. And then just for the time being, we'll put up the roughness. We'll pop in texture projection, transform, get the normal, pop that in there. In fact, I'm probably going to ditch this actually. I'll leave it up there for a second because it looks okay. But we will grab a noise, put that in the roughness, transform projection, and set it to box, solo it so we can see it, bring it down till it looks like, you know when you rub your finger over the surface of a rock? The kind of feeling that you have from that, that's kind of what I want to get. So I'm going to bring in the contrast, bring it down the octaves, and that's pretty much it, just like that. You can see the effect that's having. We will store render buffer, unplug it. See how it's just giving us little sparkles. You see, store in there, little sparkles. I hope YouTube compression isn't getting rid of that, but they're there. Now to get them going a little bit more crazy, and you can see they can very quickly just go from nice sparkles to just fireflies, and that's not nice. Now what we can do to emphasize these is if we unplug the normal, keep them quite tame for a minute. I'm gonna bring down the scale a little bit more, solo it to see how it's doing. That should do. If we duplicate it, put in the same transform and projection, but put it in the bump. Now here's where the effect really comes into play, because you're using the noise on the bump and the roughness, so you start to kind of play with that We can maybe bring in the scale a little bit again. And again, it's tweaking and it's tweaking and going back and forth. Now the way the light's hitting that there, I'm going to store the render buffer, unplug the bump, put the normal in, unplug that. I think the effects of it are a little more prominent now. It just gives that rock look. Now you do that under the right lighting, you get this kind of sparkly effect, which just looks awesome. But I can't spend too much time on it right now, unfortunately, because we have trees to plant and grass to grow. So I'm just going to drag this light around a little bit, maybe come back to this. I mean, most of this is going to be buried anyway, so it really doesn't matter. One thing I may do is just drag it back into its grey state a little bit, because it's quite dark right now. Maybe we don't want that. Maybe we do. Maybe we do. Well, for now, looks okay. Okay, so we're going to move on to the grass now. It's pretty basic stuff if you've used Forester before. We're just going to get multiflora, and we're just going to get long grass. Not that it matters. We will delete the unwanted materials, and we will drop it, convert it, and then remove the unused, and it's applied. And we will set up the material first, actually. Basic stuff, David Ariev technique that David Ariev got from someone else, but I don't know that person's name. Maybe it doesn't matter. I think everybody just does this at this point. But put the roughness. So the reason I'm going quick through this is because I've done it in other tutorials, and I am assuming you've been there. If you haven't, I'm sorry. I hope it didn't go too quick. People always say that, they always say I go too quick. But we're just going to put this in the transmission, only on the diffuse texture. We'll put a color correction in the diffuse that goes to each diffuse, and we'll put a color correction that goes to the transmission. And we'll just bring down the gamma. And I haven't even looked at it, but I think I know it looks good. So then we're going to grab an Octane scatter, put the grass in the scatter, change it to surface, and make the surface the rock. And now I've got a big fluffy ball, but I don't want that. So we're going to decrease that by a lot, because it looks a bit scary right now, actually. I don't think I like that very much. But it's taking ages to catch up. Or maybe it's still this size, who knows. Next up, what we can do is just, I'm going to decrease the size a little bit more, because it's still quite puffy. A little bit. I mean, it depends the kind of scaling you want to go for. I think on the reference scene for this, I did have around 35,000 grass instances. Now I'm going to go to 15,000, and I'm going to go into the scale. I'm going to put a noise in there, maybe an electric, because electric is quite good for contrast. We'll maybe set it to about 400. And we'll just play with the low clip and the brightness. Maybe bring down the high clip a little bit. But that just gives you those kind of natural looking patches, which look quite cool. Now I'm going to go back to the lighting. I'm going to bring it in a little bit. I'm going to try and get a little more oppressive with the lighting. Just because the textures are set up now, you can kind of do that. Back to that whole highlight compression, if I turn that off, you can see how ugly it gets. So we'll keep that away. Now going back into the grass material, this time I am going to look at it. The reason I set it up without looking at it is so you don't have to wait for the live viewer. If you know the method, it can be quite an easy thing to do. So I'm maybe going to bring down that gamma a little bit more to get that kind of ever so slightly unrealistic scatter. And we can go for a more autumny color, or a more huey color, more kind of that turquoise grass that you see on kind of fern plants. Who knows what one you want to go for. I think I'm gonna stick around here, lean into that a little bit more, bring up the gamma ever so slightly, and I like that color. That looks good for now. And I'm just gonna pop up the count to 25 just to cover some of these little bits here. You kind of want those little dents in there. Typically I would just pop in another grass and change it to a different kind of grass, and then at least you've got two fighting together, so that's always cool. and call that grass. You can save it. And you can always, if you want your rock to show, you can always just decrease the brightness a little bit, increase the contrast. And at least in doing so, you're not going to miss out on the beautiful rock texture if you spend a lot of time on it. But for now, I'm not really going to worry about it. I don't care. Next up, we will put in another scatter. I'm going to turn off the grass, but we will put in a tree. Put in a tree. And for the tree, I'm just going to make sure it's the kind of size we want. So let me do 0.2, 0.1, and we'll go into the tree library. And I think I'm going to go for, we're probably going to change this, but for now, I don't know, a platinus can do. And we will set it to 4. And we'll just do what we did before with the textures. Over materials. Remove unused. I'm going to put these in a group. Call it grass. And we're just going to set the same thing up again. I'm doing the exact same method, so I could potentially cut this out. Okay, so that's me done with the grass texture. I've got no choice but to cut it out now because I didn't speak through the whole thing. So we'll just put that in a layer, call it tree, and we'll pop that in the Octane scatter, surface, rock, and we'll let them load in. We're probably only going to be using a few hundred trees. The amount that is going to load in is going to be bizarre, and that's what's good about this, is we don't need as many trees as you typically would if you're making a massive forest or something ridiculous. We'll put this to like 0.03. We'll get a nice realistic scale. I think that looks alright. We're going to maybe go a bit bigger, but what we're going to do is we're going to put noise in the scale again. We're going to go back for that electric, make it quite big. And you just see you have those smaller ones and the bigger ones, just like trees in real life, they're not all the same size. And we want to emulate that the best we can. I'm maybe going to put this down a bit back to 100 though, just to get more obvious variation. But I think I might make the trunk height a little bit more. Maybe 1500, just because we're not really seeing any of it. We're only really seeing they don't look like bushes right now. We're just going to launch that trunk up at least and start to look like trees. I'll save this again. And it looks a little bit unpopulated right now. It looks a little bit raw. So what we're going to do is we're going to start increasing the trees. Oh, it was moving the rock. That's why the scene was getting slow. So we're just going to tackle this by, we're going to increase the variations of trees. So we'll maybe add one more version or two more versions of trees. And we will add some lighting and do some camera tricks and see how we can art direct the scene. Okay, so we're going to start making the trees and we're going to art direct the scene. I took a break. I made a coffee. I think that's always valuable to do when you're creating art. You need some white space within your work. So the first thing we're going to do now is we're going to add in a texture environment. I'm going to darken this to black. Now this is going to darken our shadows more. It's going to give us more of that effect we applied on the rock. This is going to kind of push us to that realistic look that we want. So we can just call that sky, and we can put the light up there with it. Those two kind of belong next to each other. You could even put the camera up there too. So what we'll do is we'll turn back on the grass for a second just to see where we're at. You can see right now we've really got the essence of this just kind of green ball. The trees and the grass are kind of in unison. I'm actually going to push the color of the trees away from the grass. I know it might seem, in your brain you could think, well, everything's green. They're not. These things aren't the same kind of colors. They're more or less going to be different most of the time. I'm just going to kind of push into this autumny, more dialed down green. I'm not really one for oversaturated images, so I'm just going to lean back into this. Now I am going to play with the noise for a minute, because I don't want it to just be covered in this green, so I think maybe some contrast. If we bring down the low clip a little bit, we can maybe turn off the trees for a second, just to see what we're doing. And you can see that black shadow we added is really doing a lot of heavy lifting right now. We could come back to 100, just so we're starting to get those kind of trails going through it. Maybe something like this. Now, what gets difficult, and I think that's where contrast comes in useful, is when you start playing with it a lot, you start getting these tiny little kind of sprites of grass which don't look good. They look very fake, and contrast can just help get rid of them. Make sure that you're getting something that looks nice. Really, the essence of how your grass looks is once the lighting's in place. You can tell right now that this is nice lighting. Once that's in place, these 4 controls here and the global scale are kind of everything, you know. So you really got to dive into that. Once you eventually get it somewhere you like I could probably say I like this at this point, you can just kind of leave it and move on. So we'll save that and we'll turn back on our trees. And now I really want to dive into the trees and see where we can take that. So I'm going to call this light key, and with the tree I am going to turn off the first tree, duplicate it, and we're going to find a second tree. So I like the look of this tree. I think I might try and get something that's a little bit wider to do some more of the heavy lifting in that area. So we had the platanus. I could say that in a million different ways. But what we're going to use next, I think, if I'm looking, maybe we could try a red oak. One that always stands out to me, which I like, is the Lagerstromia. I really like that one. He's got a nice radius. But we'll try this one just now. Not too many render levels, which might be okay. We'll turn him on. We'll have a look at him. One thing I wanted to discuss in this tutorial actually was one thing I've been meaning to read for a while, was The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. I just finished reading it. There's a ton of lessons there, and if you are into self-development and improving your life so it improves your art, I definitely recommend reading it. And there was a lesson in the book, because it's kind of constructed like that. It's a short book. He speaks about how the professional artist has his carpets cleaned and the dishes washed so the muse can enter. If you don't know, the muse is what gives us our creativity, so to speak. And I think that's really interesting, because I always found that when my house is tidier, I find it easier to make stuff. And I thought it was an interesting concept. So maybe that's all you need. You know, maybe you're struggling in a minute. Tidy your room. Do you good. And then you can make better art. Anyway, the trees have loaded in. We'll put in the second one. And then what that's going to do is, in conjunction, take away some of the new tree and put in the first tree. And we can see how that looks. It's most likely going to look pretty cool. Absolutely. Now, you can see here, I don't want that in there. I want that in there. You can see here we haven't actually put the mixed material on our material yet, because I'm a doofus. So we're just going to, well, no, we don't want the grass material. I did it all backwards. So we're just going to sort that out. We'll put the tree material on the tree. Okay, so that's our material sorted. It looks good. Now, we're going to create a separate material for our tree, for our second tree. And the reason we're going to do that is to help break it up a little bit, to help bring in that realism and that variation, and to let our brains kind of acknowledge that there's more than one tree at play here. So we'll do that, and we'll just add this, we'll call it tree 2, and easily enough we just put that on the red oak. And all we're going to do is offset some things. Maybe the leaves aren't as thick on this tree, maybe the tree doesn't have as many leaves, and we can kind of proxy all of that through the material here. So maybe we'll just kind of shift more into those warm colors, bring up the gamma, bring down the gamma here, bring up the saturation. I think even that, you can see the color's been broken up. Everything's beginning to look a little bit more realistic. The next thing I would do is put our sampling rate up, and we'll jump into that F2 view from earlier. I am indeed going to put in another light. Now this light, right above right now, I'm going to bring down the strength to 1000, I'm gonna make him a bit bigger. So I kind of want him to be a bit more of a field light. I'm gonna find a good spot for him. Now I can bring down the strength just to see what spot he suits. We can even turn off the first light again just to see where he may belong. I think somewhere in the back here will look good. And we can always shove away the background here so he's not really causing any disruptions with that. And then we bring back on that fill light and everything's kind of back to normal. And you can see here, we're kind of filling in that side now through this light, which looks pretty cool. I don't know how much I want to keep that. Maybe I just want to emphasize the light on this trees that this further away key light can't punch into. By just placing a softer light closer, it adds to that light. So you're using two lights as one light. It's just kind of different stages of that light. So then we could call this fill. And you know what we can do at this point? Well, we can turn it off because we can see him there. So I just want to turn him off and we'll save. And I think at this point, your scene starting to look good. You don't want to keep messing with those similar things. And the kind of same parameters we've messed with up to this point. So we can start messing with cameras. Now I mentioned in the intro about what I actually did with the camera. It wasn't straight on. We were playing with perspective. How do we do that? Well, look. You bring it over in the X. Bring it up in the Y. You're just going to point the camera down. You do it further. Bring it down. Move it over. Look at that. It's awesome. I love that. It looks cool. Now, we're only at 70mm right now. I don't like that. So we're going to go to 200, 300, and we're going to back up. Now what this does is that messes with the perspective. Everything feels flatter now. Everything feels closer. And again, that's an effect I like a lot. Now the lighting feels too flat for me right now. So I'm going to back that light up just kind of around the back a little bit more, and I'm going to make him thinner, more of a strip rather than that kind of wide field, just to make sure that shadow around the back is still kind of coexisting. Maybe start to mess with the brightness of it to see what happens. I might bring in the background a little bit again, just because it's a little bit too dark up here, and I want it to kind of be perceived as one color. Who knows? But what we're going to do is we're going to come back to no layer, and we'll put in a glossy material, or even a diffuse. Actually, we'll change that to diffuse. And I'm just going to pop in this website here. I used this in my previous tutorial. It's a brilliant resource for getting color palettes. Now I'm going to find a color that I feel goes with this. And looking at it, I don't quite know what one I want to go for yet. But of course I'm going to stick to the kind of white look. Maybe I won't, maybe I'll go darker. And the beautiful thing about this resource here is, for example, we can just grab 343A40 and we can pop it in here and see how it looks. And it looks pretty cool if you ask me. I like it. Now what I don't like is this bit's light and that bit's dark. I don't like that. Personally, I'm not big on that. Highlight compression again, doing some of the work. Now we can start to combat that with our gamma, but it's not true to what we are trying to achieve. So we're going to grab the fill light. I'm going to grab Mr. Fill, and we're going to zero out his rotations. And we're going to, so he's actually already looking in the direction we want. You can see that. We're going to get him on the background. His job is watching the background. And you can see now, everything is getting even. And I like that. You might not. Who knows? But it's your art. You do what you want, you know? Now, you can always lift up the darkness of your shadows through the sky we put in. Because everything is a little bit dark right now. Maybe that's where we bring Mr. Fill back into play. And we can always turn the background light down a bit. That kind of cuts off that solid line ever so slightly. He is still existing though. Maybe, just maybe, we put Fill back in that position from earlier, watching the back. Who knows? There's a lot of ways we can go with this. I think I'm going to stick him here in the same position. I'm maybe going to duplicate the camera. Experiment with where we were at to begin with. 0 the rotations. You can see everything's quite dark right now. Maybe I bring the key around and up. Maybe we take the strength of it up to 30,000. I think I could have had it around 70 in the original render. I think just moving around is the best way to go here. Maybe we mess with this camera. It can take a lot of playing with, which makes it hard to make a tutorial on something like this, because I could be here for an hour and a half just messing with things back and forth, you know. I could take this up to 90,000. We're beginning to kind of get the kind of punch I want from it. I do think I would most likely mess with the colors though. I used kind of a cream color in the reference. I think maybe something that's leaning into blue could be nice. We can have a look at that. Unfortunately, we can't really see it though. And I think that's where bringing the light back down will help. Don't really need the background light on this kind of color. We can come back into the camera, start playing with things, and maybe now I'll try and get that cream color. What one will we go for? We'll go for FFE8 D6. You can see how that looks. Now I like that. That's giving us a little bit of color bounce here. And those things are important, you know. Those little things add up quite a lot over time. And we can start to balance out our blowouts here. And we'll probably be getting a look that is something we're happy with. At least I would hope so. You know, I think a lot of this is camera work. I would most likely put in a VDB as we're approaching that kind of point in time. We can put on some bloom here. Start to get something nice. I'm going to change the color once more, but I'm going to stay on these kind of lines, on these kind of pinkish lines. Maybe start to lean into brown. See where that goes. That is what I like. I like that a lot. Floor is getting blown out by Phil a little bit. Bring him down. Don't want him piling on those trees too hard, but we've got the same sampling rate, so in any sense, it looks good. We can have him kind of working the front of the tree a bit more. I feel like that's probably more effective. It's having him just kind of running through the front branches there. And then at least if we were to get a third camera, just run around the side, he would be paying his dues a little bit, and that would pay off nice. Get some nice shots there. It really depends how much you want these shadows to be present. I mean, I'm quite happy with them right now. All that being said, I still like the front camera and this look. I think if we put some bloom on there, use a little bit of cut off, and make sure the image is flat, I think you have something that looks pretty nice. And I'm happy with that. And see what looks with the grass off. You know, maybe you spent 9 years on that beautiful, beautiful rock texture. Maybe you want to keep it. It just looks unfinished to me, but it's nice to see it. Now I think that's going to conclude the tutorial. Things were a little bit scattered within the last kind of 5 minutes. It's hard to follow when a tutorial gets like that, but that's the process. You know, I can't lay this process out perpetually for you. That's not how you will learn. That's not how anybody learns. And I think that is most likely the perfectionist in you that wants you to learn like that. In those moments of chaos where I'm running around changing things, changing a light, changing a camera, whoa, what is he doing? Can't follow. Don't try to follow. Don't try to copy what I'm doing. Just observe. Think if that suits for your scene, because you and me are going to have different scenes. You know, unless you've keylogged every movement I've done, our scenes are going to look relatively different. Maybe you prefer the blue, maybe you prefer the dark. That means that your values are going to have to be tweaked different. So don't try and tweak every little kind of insignificant value. The premise isn't in those parameters. It's in the way we look at this and compose our angles and our lights and materials. So focus on that and your result will come out brilliant. I'm going to conclude the tutorial there and hopefully try and fit some more in my schedule. I will put up a pack of these planet-like ecosystems on the store, so if you're interested in supporting me, you can check those out and download those. And you, of course, can download the rock, which I assume you may have done already. Just before we finish off, I wanted to record one last segment. I've actually played with this for around 45 minutes to an hour, somewhere around there. I've showed you the process and the steps of creating this, but one thing that's so vital in all of this is tweaking and taking a step back, taking a break, coming back, changing things. I'm never going to be able to get the exact same result of something kind of this complex in half an hour. So this is where it's at. 45 minutes of moving a light, making it smaller, increasing the intensity, changing a parameter, changing it again, going back and forth. And that's called art direction. And you do that for so long, and eventually it ends up somewhere cool. And I'd like your headspace to not be that you're going to get this result by the end of the tutorial, but an hour after you finish the tutorial and keep messing with it. Now, a few things I want to go over. The light is in the same position, but I've turned off the fill light. So we're just on the key light now. I kept the intensity around 90,000 and I made it way smaller than it was. So instead of 50 by 50, it's now 25 by 25. The trees, I increased the brightness a lot. Right now, yours probably looks closer to this, because of, if you followed my parameters, at least. But I increased the brightness and we got that kind of puffiness. I kept messing with the colors till I got a color that I found suited my scene. And I added a tiny little bit of fog in the scene, which is present there too. You can't really see it unless I do this, but it is there. And a big thing as well is I have a grid, ever so slightly. Now the color is giving us that kind of slight reflection there from, as you can see, that color is that. I suggest going through coolers as the site's called, and you know, I think you always get richer colors and higher quality colors if you're using hex codes, so definitely try it. You're tapping into such precise parts of the HSV spectrum that you're just, you know, or even the RGB, that you're not going to be able to just kind of get just unless you're literally just going through like this. So I think using a tool like that can help you get those accurate colors really quick. This scene in its final state will be on the store along with some others, but I really encourage you to spend the next bit of time after this tutorial playing with it, and don't be discouraged that your result isn't like mine within half an hour of the within a half-hour tutorial. My result wasn't like mine within a half-hour tutorial, and this again is 45 minutes later. So keep playing with it, create some awesome stuff, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.